A werewolf romance audiobook. The Alpha King's world shattered at a common cemetery. King Alistair, the formidable ruler of the realm, found himself on hallowed ground he'd sworn never to tread, seeking one last farewell to the memory of his lost love, Alara. Instead of quiet grief, he was greeted by the sound of two small, heart-wrenching sobs. Two children, barely 5 years old, knelt weeping at the moss-covered headstone. The name carved there, Alara Vanya, beloved mother, twisted the cold knife of his decade-long guilt. Yet, when the little boy, Valen, looked up, the shock was physical. His eyes were the exact, piercing shade of storm gray as the king's own. The young girl, Valeria, possessed the same delicate jawline, a perfect, tragic echo of Alara. In that instant, Alistair understood the full measure of his sacrifice. The woman he had abandoned had died raising his royal heirs in secret. He, the ruler who had chosen the iron weight of the crown over the simple warmth of love, was now faced with the devastating, living proof of his betrayal. The question now was not whether he could reign, but whether a king who sacrificed his heart could transform into the father his children desperately needed. And with the discovery of these bastard heirs, the calculating Queen Seraphina would move to protect her power. The collision between crown and blood was inevitable, and the fallout would shake the foundations of the kingdom. King Alistair sat at the head of the vast, carved oak table in his council chamber. 10 years had passed since the coronation, 10 years of successful campaigns, overflowing treasuries, and a political stability secured by his loveless marriage. Yet the hollow ache in his chest was a chronic condition. His storm-gray eyes fixed on the cold stone of the hearth, ignoring the droning voices of his assembled advisors. Chancellor Marius' smooth, persistent voice finally cut through his internal exile. "Your Majesty, the matter of Queen Seraphina's petition for a dedicated contingent of border guards requires your signature." Alistair forced his attention onto his queen, Seraphina. She sat rigid and pale in her ornate chair, her composure immaculate, her expression devoid of any genuine affection. Their marriage was a strategic alliance, a pinnacle of diplomatic success that guaranteed peace and secured vital trade routes. It was everything a king could demand, save the one thing his soul truly craved. Granted, Alistair stated curtly, not bothering to review the details. Seraphina's thin smile was purely an act of satisfaction, cold and lifeless. She was beautiful in the way a perfect marble sculpture is beautiful, untouchable, ideal, and utterly without passion. She discharged her duties as consort with mechanical precision, leaving no space for the vulnerability, laughter, or connection that might have made the endless burden of rulership bearable. Lord Alton, the Treasury Master, continued his report, seemingly oblivious to the king's distraction. "The Western provinces report a record yield this harvest, Your Majesty. The new irrigation techniques you implemented have proven most fruitful." Alistair nodded absently, his mind having already slipped away to memories of sunlit meadows, golden hair, and Alara's dreamy reverence for the harvest season. She had always spoken of the profound, simple joy found in honest work and the generous bounty of the earth. She would have been delighted by this news. "Is there anything else requiring immediate attention?" Alistair asked, a sudden, desperate urge for solitude overwhelming him. The advisors exchanged nervous glances. Their king, usually meticulous and dutiful, exhibited a rare, concerning restlessness. "Nothing that cannot wait until tomorrow, Your Majesty," Marius replied, choosing his words carefully. Alistair rose abruptly, his chair scraping violently against the stone floor. "Then we are finished here." As the council members bowed and filed out, Alistair caught his reflection in the polished surface of a ceremonial cup. The face that stared back was marked by lines of duty, a weariness deeper than mere exhaustion, making him look years older than his 32. The castle corridors became a suffocating labyrinth of memory as Alistair walked toward his private chambers. Every tapestry, every suit of armor, was a reminder of the immense weight he carried. Servants and guards bowed low, maintaining the required respectful distance, never daring to meet their ruler's eye. Everyone saw the king. No one saw the man. This enforced distance was a stark contrast to Alara, who had seen past the crown, seeing only Leo, the clumsy young lord who made her laugh with his terrible poetry. "Your Majesty," a timid voice interrupted his brooding. It was young Finn, a junior servant, pressed nervously against the wall. "Forgive me, sire, but Master Elms requests permission to begin clearing the old storage chambers in the East Tower. There are personal effects that require your review before disposal." Alistair's step faltered. The East Tower had been sealed since the day of his wedding, filled with the tangible remnants of his life before the crown had claimed him entirely. He had ordered it closed, unable to face any reminder of the man he had been forced to bury. "Personal effects?" Alistair asked, his voice sharper than intended. Finn flinched. "Yes, Your Majesty. Items from before your marriage. Master Elms thought you might wish to review them personally before they are removed." A rational voice in Alistair's mind screamed warnings. Those rooms held ghosts, memories that could only bring overwhelming pain and regret. Yet, a deeper, long-suppressed part of his soul yearned to touch the relics of a time when he was capable of genuine, uncomplicated feeling. "Tell Master Elms to wait," Alistair said finally. "I will review the contents myself." The iron key to the East Tower felt impossibly heavy in his hand as he approached the sealed door. Its weight seemed symbolic of the choices that had locked him into this gilded prison. The first chamber was draped in sheets, the furniture covered like corpses. But it was the smaller, hidden chamber beyond that stole his breath. There, sitting innocuously on a carved wooden desk, was a simple, weathered leather box. He recognized it with heart-stopping clarity. Alara's box, the one she kept filled with pressed flowers, simple sketches, and the secret love letters he had written during their clandestine courtship. He had thought it long since destroyed. With trembling hands, Alistair lifted the lid. The gentle, melancholic scent of dried lilac, her favorite, escaped like a ghost released from bondage. Inside lay treasures far more valuable than any crown jewel, a pressed lily from their first secret meeting, a crude yet endearing sketch she had made of him sleeping, and beneath it all, a sheaf of letters in her delicate hand, letters he had never seen. "My beloved Alistair," the first one began, "I know I can never send these words to you, but I must write them anyway." His legs gave out, and he collapsed into the dusty chair, clutching the letters from a dead woman who had loved him enough to let him fulfill his destiny. Alistair lost track of time as he devoured Alara's hidden correspondence. Each word was a dagger piercing his carefully constructed emotional armor. She had written through their separation, pouring out her love, her enduring pain, and, most agonizingly, her understanding of why he had to choose his destiny over their happiness. The letters spoke of sleepless nights, of dreams where they walked together through the castle, and a love that death itself seemed powerless to diminish. "I do not blame you for choosing your kingdom," one letter read. "A man who could abandon his people for love would not be the man I fell in love with. But, my darling, how I wish there had been another way." Tears blurred his vision, the first he had shed since the day of her funeral, which he had been forbidden by Queen Seraphina to attend. Seraphina had declared it inappropriate for a newly married king to publicly mourn his former mistress. He had obeyed, standing stone-faced in his throne room while the woman who held his heart was laid to rest without him. "Your Majesty," the sudden, razor-sharp voice of Queen Seraphina pierced his grief. Alistair spun around. She stood in the doorway, her pale eyes coldly taking in the scene, his tear-stained face, the scattered letters, the scent of lilac. Her expression shifted from careful curiosity to pure, frigid fury. "So," she said, stepping into the room with the measured, lethal grace of a predator. "This is where you've been hiding your shameful past." Alistair hastily gathered the fragile papers, but Seraphina had seen enough. Her lips curved into a smile utterly devoid of warmth, a predatory sign of discovered weakness. 10 years of marriage," she continued, her voice deceptively calm. "And still you pine for your dead commoner." "Do not speak of her that way," Alistair snarled, rising to his full height. The protective rage that surged through him was the first genuine, untamed emotion she had ever witnessed in his presence. Seraphina laughed, a sound like breaking ice. "Truth stings, doesn't it? While I have been the perfect queen, bearing the weight of your crown beside you, you have been cherishing love letters from a girl who merely warmed your bed before duty called." The words hung between them like drawn blades. Alistair knew he should apologize, explain, attempt to salvage the political disaster. But as he clutched Alara's letters, he realized he simply did not care about diplomatic solutions anymore. "She was worth 1,000 of you," he said quietly, the words dropping like stones into still water. Seraphina's composure cracked, revealing the raw, vindictive fury beneath. "We shall see about that," she hissed. "A king who clings to the past has no business ruling the future. Perhaps it's time the council learned about your sentimental weaknesses." She swept from the room, leaving Alistair alone with the terrifying knowledge that his moment of honesty would have monumental consequences. Looking down at the letters, he made a decision that would redefine his life. Tomorrow, he would visit Alara's grave. He needed to say goodbye properly, to honor what they had shared, whatever the political cost. He had no idea that his ultimate truth was waiting for him there. Dawn broke gray and miserably cold. Alistair, cloaked and mounted, rode through the lesser-used castle gates, avoiding the main thoroughfares. Alara's letters, tucked safely inside his doublet, pressed against his heart like a tangible, heavy promise. The common cemetery lay beyond the castle walls, a humble field where merchants and farmers found their final rest, far removed from the marble crypts of nobility. He found the simple, modest stone. When he saw the engraving, Alara Vanya, beloved mother, forever in our hearts, the world tilted. Beloved mother. The words were a physical blow. Alara had found love after him, had built a new life, and borne children to another man. The thought should have brought a strange, complicated relief, proof that she had found happiness despite his abandonment. Instead, it opened a fresh, agonizing wound. Another man had earned the joy he had surrendered for his crown. He knelt before the stone, placing a trembling hand on the cold surface. "Forgive me," he whispered into the morning mist. "Forgive me for choosing a throne over you, for letting you face the rest of life alone." A soft, heartbroken sobbing made him freeze. It was the sound of children crying, so utterly lost that his primal, protective instincts flared. He rose slowly, following the sound around a cluster of flowering hawthorn trees. What he found there changed the very axis of his existence. Two small figures, a boy and a girl, knelt beside Alara's grave. Their golden-streaked hair caught the pale sunlight. They could be no older than 5, clutching each other, weeping over scattered wildflowers. But when the little girl looked up at his approach, Alistair's reality imploded. Storm-gray eyes, his eyes, stared back at him from a face that perfectly blended his strong features with Alara's delicate beauty. The powerful, undeniable scent that reached him was the unmistakable marker of his own royal bloodline. "Papa," the little girl whispered, the single word silencing his heart. These were not another man's children. They were his. Alara had been pregnant when he left, had borne his heirs in secret, and had raised them alone until death had claimed her. The woman he loved had died protecting his legacy, and he hadn't known they existed. As the devastating truth crashed over him, Alistair felt the full, crushing weight of his colossal failure. He hadn't just abandoned his love. He had abandoned his children, his flesh, his blood, his responsibility, and his greatest potential joy. The boy, Valen, stepped protectively in front of his sister. "You're not supposed to be here," he said with heartbreaking courage. "Mama said you couldn't come back." Alistair dropped to his knees, his carefully armored heart shattering into irreparable pieces. Everything he had believed about his duty, his choices, his sacrifices, all of it dissolved in the face of two small faces carrying his image and Alara's spirit. Alistair could only stare at his children, Valen and Valeria, feeling the very foundations of his world tremble. Valeria, the girl who looked at him with those devastatingly familiar eyes, clutched a worn, stained cloth doll. Valen, the protector, remained suspiciously positioned between the king and his sister, ready to flee. "How do you know who I am?" Alistair asked, his voice barely audible. Valeria wiped her nose with the back of her small hand. "Mama showed us pictures. She said you were our papa, but you had to go away to be king. She said you loved us, but you couldn't stay." Each word was a fresh arrow in his chest. Alara had kept his memory alive for their children, speaking of him with love, not bitterness, protecting his image even as she faced motherhood alone. "What are your names?" "I'm Valeria," the girl said, her voice the clear, simple truth of childhood. "This is my brother, Valen. We're twins. Mama said we came together because we didn't want to be apart, ever." Valen's protective stance held fast. "Why are you here now?" "Mama said being king was too important." The accusation in the boy's voice stung with salt and certainty. "I didn't know about you," Alistair said, the words feeling pitifully inadequate. "I swear to you both, I didn't know your mama was expecting." "If you had known, would you have stayed?" Valeria asked, her blue eyes wide with a devastating hope. Alistair closed his mouth, unable to lie. The honest answer, that duty might still have won, would crush her. Yet lies had already cost him everything. "I don't know," he admitted, the most painful truth he had ever spoken. "But I wish I had been given the choice." Before they could respond, an elderly woman, Mistress Nora, emerged from behind a nearby monument, moving slowly with the aid of a stick. She recognized him instantly, her polite concern shifting to fear. "Your Majesty," she breathed, dropping into an awkward curtsy. "You are Alara's neighbor," Alistair stated, his voice flat. "You've been caring for them since she—" "6 months, Your Majesty," Nora finished quietly. "The fever took her quick, but she suffered much. Near the last, she called for you. She made me promise to tell the children you loved them, even if you could never come home." Alistair felt something essential break inside him. Alara had died forgiving him, believing he would choose duty, never knowing he would have given up his crown for one more day with her. "What happens to them now?" Alistair asked, dreading the answer. Nora's face clouded with worry. "I do my best, Your Majesty, but I'm old. The village helps, but times are hard. The children need more than I can provide." "They need a father," Valen said suddenly, his young voice carrying the full weight of their need. "But Mama said kings can't be papas. They have to choose their kingdoms instead. Alistair looked from Nora's worried face to his children's expectant expressions, feeling the immense, impossible weight of the choice settle on his shoulders. He could walk away, return to his beautiful, cold queen, and let these precious souls fade into obscurity. Or he could shatter everything he had built in the name of duty and, belatedly, choose love. His hands trembled as he reached for Valeria's small fingers, feeling her trust like a sacred vow. "Pack whatever you need," he said, his voice firming with resolve. "You're coming home with me." The ride back to the castle was a silent journey through Alistair's own transformation. Each mile brought new revelations about the children. Valeria, riding before him, chattered with the fearless enthusiasm of youth. Valen, serious and intelligent, absorbed every detail of their surroundings. "Is your castle very big?" Valeria asked, twisting to look up at him. Mama said it had towers that touched the clouds and rooms full of treasure. "It's big," Alistair confirmed, marveling at how natural it felt to answer her innocent questions. "But most of the rooms are empty. And the treasure is mostly old books and dusty armor." "I like books," Valen called from behind them. "Mama taught us to read. She said knowledge was the one treasure no one could steal from us." Alistair felt a surge of respect for Alara's wisdom. Even in poverty and exile, she had prepared them. As the formidable castle walls came into view, Alistair saw his home not as a seat of power, but as a potential sanctuary. The guards at the gate were visibly confused by their king's ragged companions. Alistair gave the necessary instructions. "Mistress Nora, you are under my personal protection. Anyone who questions their presence answers to me directly." In the courtyard, Chancellor Marius appeared, his face a careful study of non-reaction. "Your Majesty, we were not expecting your return so soon. Shall I prepare chambers for your guests?" The emphasized pause spoke volumes. "Prepare chambers in the family wing," Alistair stated, his voice cutting through the courtyard's sudden silence. "These children will be staying permanently." Marius's eyebrows nearly vanished beneath his hairline. "Your Majesty, perhaps we should discuss." "There is nothing to discuss," Alistair cut him off, his voice absolute. "Valen and Valeria are my children, and they will be treated with all the respect due to royal blood." The announcement fell like a political bomb, sending shockwaves across every guard, servant, and nobleman present. As if summoned by the commotion, Queen Seraphina appeared on the steps of the great hall. Her pale gaze took in the scene with devastating speed, moving from the exhausted, humbly dressed Nora to the golden-haired children, before settling on Alistair's resolute face. When her expression shifted from comprehension to raw, cold fury, Alistair knew the reckoning was about to begin. But feeling Valeria slip her small hand into his, Alistair felt only certainty. He had chosen love. The consequences would simply have to fall where they may. The private dining chamber became an arena of subtle warfare. Alistair had insisted the children join him for the evening meal. Seraphina sat rigid at the far end of the table, like a general observing the enemy. The children ate carefully, overwhelmed but trying to remember the manners Alara had taught them. "So," Seraphina said, her voice cutting through the silence, "these are the bastards you decided to inflict upon our court." Alistair's hand tightened on his wine goblet, but before he could speak, Valen looked up, his gray eyes clear and serious. "We're not bastards," the boy said with quiet dignity. "Mama said we were children of love, which makes us precious, even if we're not legitimate." The simple, honest statement hit Seraphina harder than any rage could have. Her lips tightened at the correction. "How charming. I suppose your mother filled your heads with many such romantic notions about your situation." "Our mama was wonderful," Valeria said loyally, though her lower lip trembled slightly. She helped people and sang us to sleep every night. I am sure she was very talented, Seraphina said, making the word sound obscene. One wonders what other talents she possessed to capture a king's attention so thoroughly. Alistair slammed his goblet down. That is enough. You will not speak of Alara with disrespect in front of her children. Her children? Seraphina laughed, the sound brittle and dangerous. Your bastards. Let's not dress this up. You have brought your illegitimate offspring into our home and expect me to play stepmother to the spawn of your greatest betrayal. My greatest betrayal, Alistair replied quietly, was abandoning Alara for a loveless political marriage. My children are not the products of betrayal. They are the only honest thing I've done in 10 years. Seraphina's mask finally cracked. You think you can waltz back here with your dead mistress's spawn and disrupt the careful order we've built? I think you will remember your place, Alistair said coldly, and accept that my children are now part of this family, whether you approve or not. Seraphina rose slowly, her gaze moving from the king to the children with a terrifying calculation. We shall see about that. The court will have much to say about their king's sudden display of sentimentality. I wonder how long your resolve will last when faced with the political consequences of harboring bastards. She swept from the room, leaving behind a silence thick with the promise of conflict. Valeria looked up, troubled. Did we make this scary lady angry? Alistair pulled her onto his lap, gathering Valen close. The scary lady was already angry, he said gently. But you don't need to worry about her. Your papa will keep you safe. He knew Seraphina's threats were not empty. She had the connections and the political mind to make their lives unbearable. But for the first time in 10 years, Alistair didn't care. Let them plot. His children were his, and he would protect them, even if it cost him his crown. 3 days later, the castle buzzed with venomous gossip. Servants whispered. Nobles exchanged knowing glances. Despite the attention, the twins adapted, settling into chambers adjacent to Alistair's. Papa, look, Valeria called, pointing excitedly out the window at the training yard. They're dancing with their swords. That's not dancing, Valeria, Valen corrected, displaying the superior knowledge of his extra 10 minutes of life. They're fighting. Alistair found himself smiling, a genuine, easy smile he hadn't known he possessed. Would you like to see the practice closer? He asked. Are we allowed to go places? Valen asked carefully. We don't want to cause trouble. The question hit Alistair hard. His children were already learning to see themselves as burdens. You are my children, Alistair said firmly, kneeling to their level. This is your home. You can go anywhere you want. A knock interrupted them. Marius entered, looking strained. Begging your pardon, your majesty, but Lord Edmund requests to speak with you. Something about arrangements for the young ones. Alistair's jaw tightened. He knew what arrangements Marius wanted to discuss. Can we come with you? Valen asked, slipping his hand into Alistair's. The request was innocent, but the implication was profound. Taking them to an official meeting would be a public declaration of their legitimacy. Yes, Alistair said, the decision made in an instant. It's time everyone met you properly. The council chamber fell into a charged silence as Alistair entered with his children. The assembled nobles struggled to maintain composure, facing the reality of their king's choice. Lord Garrett spoke first. Your Majesty, while we understand your paternal feelings, the presence of illegitimate children at court raises certain questions about succession and stability. What questions? Alistair asked with deceptive calm, lifting Valeria onto his lap. Well, Marius interjected, the legitimacy of the royal line has always been the cornerstone of stability. The presence of acknowledged bastards, while not unprecedented, can create complications. "Papa, what's a bastard?" Valen asked, his innocent question cutting through the political euphemisms. "A bastard," Alistair said clearly, his voice carrying to every corner, "is what small-minded people call children born outside of marriage, as if the circumstances of a child's birth diminish their worth or their capacity for greatness." Lord Garrett pressed. "Surely you understand the delicate nature of this situation. Queen Seraphina has concerns about your reputation." "My reputation?" Alistair's voice dropped to a dangerous whisper. "Are you suggesting that acknowledging my children damages my reputation?" The subsequent silence was deafening. "They are not political problems to be solved," Alistair concluded. "They are part of this family, and anyone who suggests otherwise is welcome to tender their resignation." He had drawn the line, and the consequences would follow. That evening, Alistair struggled to explain the adult world to his 5-year-olds. "Papa," Valeria said, "why don't the lords like us?" "They are afraid of change," Alistair explained. "They're used to things being a certain way. Your presence means things must be different, and some people don't like different." "Is the scary Queen Lady angry because of us?" "Queen Seraphina is complicated," Alistair admitted. "She married me for reasons that had nothing to do with love, and seeing you reminds her of things she'd rather forget." "Did you love our mama more than the Queen?" "Yes," Alistair confessed. "I loved your mama more than I've ever loved anyone." "Then why didn't you marry her instead?" Valen asked with the brutal logic of childhood. "Because I thought being a good king meant putting duty before happiness," Alistair admitted, staring into the fire. "I thought I had to choose between love and responsibility. And now I think I was wrong. A king who can't love his own children properly can't truly love his people either." The next day, Seraphina swept into his study, her silk gown rustling like snake scales. "We need to talk," she demanded. She recited the consequences with cold precision. Diplomatic inquiries from neighboring kingdoms about the succession irregularities and the suspension of a vital alliance. "You are willing to risk war for the sake of 2 bastard children?" "I'm willing to risk anything for my children," Alistair corrected. "And if that threatens the political arrangements you've spent 10 years building, perhaps those arrangements were built on foundations too weak to survive." Seraphina's face was white with rage. "You will send those children away, to a monastery, a countryside estate, or I will make their lives here so miserable they'll beg to leave. How long before the council decides a king who prioritizes bastards over the realm's stability is unfit to rule?" "You would tear down the kingdom out of spite?" Alistair asked, his voice deadly quiet. "I would save the kingdom from a king who has lost his way," she corrected. "Return to being the ruler you were, or you'll discover just how much damage an angry queen can do to the things a king loves most." She departed, leaving behind the certainty of war. The first signs of organized resistance were subtle. Meals served cold to the children, cleaners mysteriously skipping their chambers, guards absent when needed. Alistair discovered the full scope of the plot when Mistress Nora was found in tears, scrubbing mud from the children's clothes. They had been near the stables, and someone had placed burrs beneath the horse saddles, causing the animals to rear and snort wildly. "We went to the stables like you said we could," Valen explained, subdued. "But the horses went wild. We could have been trampled." "Who was on duty at the stables?" Alistair demanded. "Lord Garrett's men, Your Majesty," Nora replied reluctantly. "But they claimed they saw nothing." The pattern was clear. Lords opposed to the children were using their influence to create a hostile environment. "Papa," Valeria whispered, "are we causing trouble again?" The stable boys looked at us like we were bad. The hurt in her voice pushed Alistair past rage into a cold, calculating fury. His children were internalizing the hatred. Just then, Marius entered, his face pale with dread. Your Majesty, I've received a formal petition from several lords requesting an audience about kingdom security. They wish to discuss the need for a regency council. The political coup was official. His lords intended to declare him unfit to rule, strip him of his authority, and mandate his children's exile. Who signed this petition? Lords Garrett, Aldrich, and Westbrook, Marius whispered, clearly terrified. They want to take my children away, while I'm prevented from stopping them, Alistair concluded. Tell the lords I will meet with them tomorrow at dawn in the throne room, with my children present. The final confrontation began at dawn. The throne room was packed. Seraphina sat with an icy triumph. The rebellious lords clustered in the center, ready for their victory. Alistair took his throne, Valen and Valeria flanking him. My lords, Alistair began, his voice carrying absolute authority. I understand you have concerns about my fitness to govern. Lord Garrett stepped forward. We're concerned about decisions that prioritize personal sentiment over the kingdom's welfare, the presence of illegitimate children, or the inconvenience. Alistair interrupted quietly. You speak of damage to alliances, but you mean other kingdoms question whether I can be controlled. You speak of instability, but you mean my choices make your positions less secure. The Regency Council, Lord Westbrook stated formally, would assist your Majesty in making decisions that serve the greater good rather than personal inclination. Alistair rose from his throne. The air shifted. The compromised king was gone, replaced by a primal alpha. Let me be clear. My children are not political problems. They are my blood, my heart, my joy. He stepped down toward the lords. And anyone who thinks they can take them from me is welcome to try. Just as Garrett prepared to issue his final decree, an unexpected commotion erupted. Lord Edmund, followed by a group of younger nobles, pushed through the crowd. Behind them streamed common folk, Thomas the blacksmith, Sarah the baker. They were people who should never have been admitted to the throne room, yet they stood tall. This is highly irregular, Garrett sputtered. What's irregular is attempting to overthrow a king because he chooses to love his children, Edmund retorted. We've come to say it ain't right, cried the baker. A man who won't fight for his own children ain't fit to fight for anyone else's. And what of duty? Garrett demanded, playing his final, desperate card. My highest duty, Alistair said simply, looking directly at his children, is to be the man my children can be proud of. Everything else flows from that. Seraphina, defeated by the loyalty of the common people, rose with an icy finality. If that is your choice, husband, then live with the consequences. She swept from the room, taking her allies with her. Alistair watched them go, but he was no longer alone. He had lost his queen and his political consensus, but he had found his authentic self and the true heart of his kingdom. The castle emptied like a ship taking on water. Lords Garrett, Aldrich, and Westbrook departed, taking their household guards and leaving behind subtle economic threats. Alistair felt immense relief, though the political cost was mounting. It's so peaceful now, Papa, Valeria observed, spinning in the suddenly quiet throne room. The echo is different too, Valen added. Less angry. The king and his new allies, Lord Edmund, Lady Margaret of the coastal provinces, and Captain Hayes of the River Guard, immediately set about rebuilding. The grain shipments were delayed due to Garrett's interference with the transport routes, and King Marcus of West March had suspended negotiations. Alistair was isolated, but he was free. Papa, are we causing problems again? Valen asked. You're not causing problems, Alistair said firmly. But my choices are having consequences. Change is always difficult, even when it's necessary. The new allies, however, brought hope. Lady Margaret devised coastal routes to bypass Garrett's controlled territory, and Lord William of the Northern Territories arrived to pledge support. "We support a king who has the courage to love openly," William declared. Alistair was building a new coalition based on authenticity, competence, and service to the people, not on fear or political obligation. The final test arrived a year later. A massive army flying Queen Seraphina's banners, supported by neighboring kingdoms who saw Alistair's realm as unstable. 15,000 troops faced Alistair's 8,000 loyalists. Alistair faced his children, who watched the dust clouds from their window. "Are you scared?" Valen asked. "I'm concerned about keeping you safe," Alistair admitted. "But I'm not afraid of fighting for what's right." "Will you have to send us away to keep us safe?" Valeria's voice was small, haunted by the old fear. "Never," Alistair said, holding them tight. "We stay together no matter what happens." He met Seraphina in a final parley. "Renounce the bastards," she demanded again. "And this ends without bloodshed." "I will not abandon my children," Alistair said, his voice ringing with power. "I will not allow fear to drive me back into the cage I spent 10 years building around my own heart." "Then you have chosen war." "I've chosen family," Alistair corrected. "You chose war." The battle raged for 3 days, but it was a war of conversion. Seraphina's troops, fighting for obligation, defected in droves, unable to face farmers and craftsmen fighting for their actual homes and children. Seraphina was defeated, her careful strategy obliterated by the overwhelming power of popular loyalty. "This is not how wars are supposed to be fought," Seraphina said, broken and desperate. "It's a choice," Alistair replied. "People are simply deciding what kind of kingdom they want to live in." He granted her a peaceful annulment. "Go home, Seraphina. Find someone who can love you the way you deserve to be loved, the way I never could." As she departed, Alistair felt the immense, beautiful weight of years of regret lift from his shoulders. He was free. He walked to the gardens where his children waited. "Did we win, Papa?" Valen asked. "We survived," Alistair replied, embracing them both. "And sometimes that is the greatest victory of all." The Alpha King had finally learned that true strength was not found in the sacrifice of love, but in its fierce protection. If you want to be the first to know when I post my next story, you need to join his pack. Smash that like button to show your loyalty. And don't just watch from this video. Subscribe right now and hit the notification bell so you don't miss the next stories. Your support is the only thing that keeps me going. Subscribe now.